The topic of today's lecture is text interpretation. A work of art is a product of the choice of a writer, poet, or any creative person of a side of reality, and the reflection of the individual process of his cognition. Any manifestation of the surrounding world can be chosen as a side of reality. A reflection of this area of reality is the theme of the work, and the process of choosing an object of cognition by the author, a writer, is not random, because it is subordinated to the action of some forces. For example, the forces of the main conflicts of the era, social, ideological, political, ethnopolitical, psychological, emotional, and many others. Choosing some kind of life material, the author himself obeys its specifics. The answer of a writer or creative person to the most pressing questions contributes the idea of the work, since the writer constantly experiences the impact of the ideological and aesthetic norms, standards developed by society. Then at all stages of creating a work, from conception through the process of embodiment to completion, complete and indissoluble unity of subjective and objective factors operates, which ensure the uniqueness and the originality of each creation, actually its ideological and the aesthetic value. The object of research in the interpretation of the text is a work of fiction, prose text in a foreign language, short stories by contemporary writers. For the stylistics of the text, it is necessary to grasp the individual role and specificity of the speech of the heroes of the work through the expressive stylistic means of each level, from phonographic, grammatical, lexical, up to syntactic. The meaning and content of the interpretation of a literary text is a development of the ideological, aesthetic, semantic, and emotional information of this work of art, which is realized through the recreation of the author's vision and knowledge of reality. A huge role belongs to the addressee of the message. It means to the reader. It should be clarified that the information contained in a specific or some newspaper article, some official document, always corresponds to a given circle of addressees. In this circle of addressees, readers, women readers, are limited to a certain set of features. The first is educational, the second is social, number three professional, number four political, number five territorial, and the last one is national. Another thing, with an artistic method, the object of knowledge is not limited. The process of cognition of reality can be for different readers acceptable, unacceptable, understandable or incomprehensible, true, false, fair, unfair, deep or shallow. The process of perception of works of art by the reader depends on several features. The first is on his personal knowledge, and the second is on his personal thesaurus. Each reader places his own emphasis. It means that he interprets in his own way. Is the most correct final interpretation of work of art? Actually, it's difficult to identify. First, truly fictional work is more or less ahead of its time, reflecting newly emerging trends and conflicts. Modern readers do not always succeed in realizing the depth and significance of the problems raised. And secondly, one must always remember about the evolution of the personality that perceives the work of art, since its culture and spiritual needs are changing. What is artistic text? This is the middle element of the communicative act scheme, which, having been extremely simplified, can be represented as a structure of three elements: writer, addressee, text, and reader. The objective world of a literary text appears along with the creation of the text, and not after the text. The form of a work of art and its creation is always present in it. Fictional text is complex, The task of the reader is to extract the maximum of thoughts and the feelings inherent in this text. The principle of communication between writer, between reader, can be the same as the principle of a funnel. The first is the whole word flows through the white path. The next is after this, the text is realized by the writer and turns into a work of fiction. And the final step is based on this, the reader must recreate all the riches of reality, which is concentrated in the text. How to distinguish the special meaning of an artistic word, phrase, or work? Through the images in which the semantic and the aesthetic information of the artistic text is concentrated. An image is a representation of the general through the individual, the abstract through the concrete, the abstract through the sensually visual or tangible. Through linguistic means, the sensual visualization of the image is embodied and created. Text to images, artistic speech becomes aesthetically significant. All capabilities of units of all levels. Um, uh, uh, the first is phonemes, it means sounds, intonation and stress, morphemes, derivational, inflectional, prefixes, suffixes, and so on. The second is units of the lexical level, synonyms, antonyms, polysemic words. And the third one is units of the syntactic level, phrases and sentences. And also a number of stylistic means at each level are implemented in the presence of an organized environment, actually in the context. It is against the background of the context that the actualization or advancement of linguistic unit takes place. This use of language means um, is a kind of perception, of personal perception. As for artistic details, actually, this phenomenon is associated with the impossibility of grasping the phenomenon in its entirety, as well as the need to convey the perceived part of the phenomenon to the addressee, so that he gets an idea of the phenomenon as a whole. In analysis, an artistic detail is often identified with metonymy based on the relationship between the part and the whole. Singing dog or performance of the big through the small. The true content of an artistic detail can be perceived by different readers with varying degrees of depth. It depends on the reader's thesaurus, mood, or conditions of perception. The context is sufficient for the successful functioning of metonymy. For example, all flags will visit us. Artistic details are divided into pictorial, clarifying, and characterological. Pictorial artistic details create visual image of the description as an element in the image of nature, in the image of appearance. For example, the author nowhere condemns his heroine but creates a complete picture of her life. For example, her life and family, her character through detail. For example, underground neighbor, some clothes, and so on. At home, after the scene, for example, she had made for her husband. She saw on the back of his chair his coat, old, shiny, frayed cuffs, and clarifying artistic detail is used in dialogical speech too. A characteristic is a description of the hero's movement, indicating the details of the route, names of streets, underground stations, bridges, lanes, and so on. The reader gets a picture of movement, fast or unhurried, and this picture will reflect the state of mind of the hero. Characterological art detail. This type of artistic detail is scattered all over the world and they are presented in passing as something famous. Each detail marks a different side of the character. The author carefully prepares the reader's conclusion, guiding it along the milestones the details are placed in the text. characterological detail creates the impression of the elimination of the author's point of view, and therefore is especially often used in the emphatically objectified prose. Under certain conditions, an artistic piece can become an artistic symbol. For example, in the works of Hemingway, the symbol of misfortune in the novel Farewell to Arms is rain. In the snows of Kilimanjaro, it is hyena. The historical details of Goldsworthy landscape descriptions in Son of the Forsyths associated first with the birth and development of the love of two main characters. This love is described as a kind of sunlight, like in the sun, in full sunlight, in the warm sun. Conversely, there is no sun in any description of a walk or business trip. The sun is a symbol of love that illuminated the fate of the heroes. Strong position. The beginning of a work of fiction is important for the author and the reader, for whom landmarks are first laid. The beginning is a tightly limited volume of the first block. It happens that the introduction of coordinates is deliberately scattered through the text. This is a special way of organizing text. The reader can engage in ongoing conversation about someone they know. For an adequate perception of the work, it is important not only to have a character landmark, but also to represent this landmark. The grammatical tense is present in the introduction of key sentences. Temporary pointers are very important not only in themselves, but for activating the reader's perception, intensifying associative figurative representations. Space is the third meaningful universal of the literary text. A closed space always bears the imprint of its owner, while an open space acts as a contrasting or harmonious background of the character's feelings, experiences. This is a short position. Title. It acts as an actualizer of all text categories. The category of information content of the title is enclosed in the title of an object by topic. The category of modality manifests itself in the headline through the use of emotionally evaluative word. For example, the quiet American, one the hero in the headlines of a number of newspaper and journalistic genres. For example, you cannot live without women. It's on March 8, ladies' celebration, or women's charm. The category of completeness is expressed in the separation of the complete text from another. The headline is called a box mark that requires a return to itself. The title is alienated from the text. It's always printed in a different font at a distance from the text. Indicates the genre. The distance between the heading and the text allows you to include an epigraph, dedication, forward, expressions of acknowledgement. Familiarity with the title forms a reading attitude, which can be called pretext reading. The evolution of a heading design must be viewed in relation to predictive function. An incorrectly formed attitude toward perception provokes the effect of disappointed expectations when reading. The reader who does not accept the signal sent to him by the author will find himself in a more difficult position. The heading penetrates and is incorporated in the unified text system. It must be remembered that the semantic content of the heading does not coincide when entering and leaving the text.